All right, good evening, everyone. And this is the Minnetrista City Council meeting for September 21st. And we're going to start out with roll call. I'm Lisa Whalen, the mayor, and also present when I call your name, just say here. Mike Baroni, our administrator.
I'm here.
Ali Polfus, our director of administration.
I'm here.
David Abel, our community development director.
Here.
And Brian Grimm, our finance director.
Here.
And Paul Falls, our chief of police.
Here.
Chris Lindquist, our city clerk. Here. And Gary Peters, our public works superintendent.
Here.
And council members present, Shannon Bruce.
Here.
John Chumperlin.
Here.
Pam Mortensen. Here. Mike Molitor.
Here.
And also our consultants, Ron Beatty with Kennedy and Graven, our attorney.
Here.
And Allison Falsky, our city engineer with WSB. Here. And Adam Gabois with who is our assistant engineer, also with WSB. Are you here this evening?
Here.
All right. Is that everybody? I think. All right. With that, then our second order of business is to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'd like to ask, since Ali did such a wonderful job last time, maybe you would do that again this time.
I'm happy to. I
Thank
pledge
you.
allegiance. Yep. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to approval of our agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. This is Pam.
All right,
Shannon,
Pam
I'll
has
second.
made that. Okay, Ms. Mortensen made that motion and Ms. Bruce seconded that. All those in favor will signify with aye. I'll start out. I'm Lisa Whalen, yes. We have Shannon Bruce.
Yes.
John Chumperlin.
Yes.
Pam Mortensen.
Yes.
Mike Molitor.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. So we'll move on to special presentations. I believe we have with us this evening Colin Charlson and I think Kevin Borg, Superintendent of the West Tonka School District. Are you gentlemen with us?
Madam Mayor, this is Kevin Borg. Yes, I'm here.
All right, and Mr. Charlson, are you here as well?
I'm also standing by, yep, and I'll present shortly after Kevin's done.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. You'll have an opportunity here to make a presentation to the City Council, so go ahead, whichever one would like to go first.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks for the opportunity of being on your agenda. Back in August, I sent an email to the council regarding CARES funding. And in my email, the big thing that I wanted to express to the city was with CARES funding, we had heard as school districts that cities had funding, and for some cities, they might have a difficult time allocating those funds. And if they weren't able to allocate it in the city, that it would go to the county level. And so in my email, I just want to express that if the city did not feel they were able to keep the dollars in the community, to make them aware that as a school district, we would have needs. And obviously the West Tonka School District being one of several school districts represented in Minnetrista, but I was only speaking for our district. And so we have a lot to be thankful for with the city, with your cooperation in keeping our kids safe in school. We've launched school now and we're in our third week with students, and It's just wonderful to have the kids back in the building, and we appreciate our community's efforts, our staff's effort in allowing us to have a successful start. But really appreciate the city's cooperation as we look at the police department and public works and how you work with the schools. Want to say thank you. It's really in that spirit of just trying to extend communication for that collaboration to continue. As I mentioned, for school districts across the state to open an in-person education, the needs are significant. If you look at everything from technology needs to staffing needs to needs with PPE to transportation, a lot of different needs, and how we can best do that, keep kids safe, and try to give them an in-person experience. With that, when I sent out the email to the city of Minnetrista, I sent it out to the other cities that the West Tonka School District um, that represent the West Tonka School District. And with that, we had a good response from 2 cities. And so when I sent my original email, it was that we saw that we were going to have needs. And now it appears that how 2 other cities have called upon our district or participated with our district, our needs are going to be met through their efforts. Right now, what we're doing is trying to forecast expenses forward, and we're looking at grants that we know that still have to come to pass. But at this point right now, we would be saying that our funds that we need to manage our expenses would be met by the other cities' participation. If that come to change, and the city isn't able to spend their dollars, I'd love the opportunity to engage further. Otherwise, I would just speak as a resident in Minnetrista of just still with that hope that we can find a way to place those dollars in our community where they're needed.
Thank you, Mr. Borg, and I'm sure we will do that. I think we've already said we don't want to send it back to the county, and so we're going to be talking about that later on in our meeting here. So, but thank you very much for your words here. Mr. Charlson, did you want to weigh in or have anything else to comment on?
No, thank you, Lisa, and thank you to the rest of the council as well for having myself as well. I'm a Minnetrista resident and own and operate a business just across 110 in the city of Mound, and certainly appreciate being a part of our community and all that you guys do. So things have changed here quickly in the last, quite frankly, hours, but it seems like that's the new normal. I hate that term, but I'm getting used to it. So, and maybe Kevin can shed some light on this too, but just today, as an example of how quickly things can change with COVID, today the Minnesota State High School League reinstated volleyball and football this fall. And I haven't had a chance to speak with Kevin directly on this, but I'm sure that has an impact on the potential funding needs for the school district as well. I got involved quite early in the process with the city of Mound at request of the city council. We had several business owners and local community members that formed a committee to give feedback to the city at the city of Mound on what potential needs might be in the community and what the CARES Act dollars could be used to help with. And so that's when I engaged Kevin and engaged the city council as well in early August. And so unfortunately, we just didn't have a lot of movement from the city of Minnetrista early, so we weren't able to coordinate some of the dollars. The city of Mound has contributed a significant amount of money to the school district, but also to from the city of Orono to our school district for their pupils that attend in the city of Orono. And this became really relevant to me and the committee as we talked through things and from an economic impact in our communities. Me as an example, in my operation, I have 2 employees here that have children that attend West Tonka schools. And I know all too well what happens when their children are not able to attend school because of COVID. And the way the CARES Act works and the new legislation that backs it. If a parent has to be home with the child because of distance learning requirements, either for quarantine or other reasons, I still have to keep them on payroll, even though they can't contribute to my operation as a business owner. And so it became really clear to our committee, several of us felt the same way, that the schools should be a focus point of these dollars really spurring economic activity in our communities to allow our businesses to continue to participate. I can tell you also that we thought of a lot of different ways that we can help businesses in our community. Obviously, more of a Main Street business community than we have in Minnetrista proper. And we just couldn't find a way that was truly equitable to all businesses that were impacted by COVID-19. And so we decided a large portion of the CARES Act dollars would be allocated towards the school district. So my hope is that moving forward, the city will find a way to keep the dollars in the community, not a way to necessarily allocate the dollars towards the general budget, but rather to a place that has a direct impact from COVID-19. And if those opportunities aren't exist, that I would ask you guys to consider the school district, because I am 100% certain that Kevin is day to day right now on what is happening at the school district. It's changed week to week. Both of my children, in fact, today were out of school because my son has a cold and a cough, and we're waiting for a negative test result on his COVID-19 test. Thankfully, I don't think he has COVID-19, but it has a large impact on what happens in our communities when a child can't be in school. My wife and I both were not able to be in our office today because we're waiting these negative test results. So anyway, big picture, I'd love for these dollars to find a way into our community that is impactful. I, as a community resident, I would not approve of the dollars being spent on general budget items, but rather those in community need. Thank you for having us. I'll be quiet and listen. If you have any questions, I'm happy to converse.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Charlson. Does the council have any questions of Mr. Borg or Mr. Charlson? If not, I'll just real quick, Mr. Borg, I'm assuming that the school district is under the same requirements as the city, that these funds have to be spent on or before November 15th. Is that also the case for the school district?
So the funds that the school district is in a different fiscal year than what the city would be. So our funds are July 1 to December 31st. I believe your funds are from March 23rd to November 15th. So there's a little bit of difference of the dates of how they apply, but it is.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That clarifies that. All right, anybody else have questions? I know, like I said before, this is going to be a discussion later on our agenda. So
This is
right.
Shannon. This is Shannon. I have a question. I'm assuming that if Mound and Orono have contributed some of their funding to West Tonka schools, that there's some kind of reporting requirement that you've established with them. And would you, if we do decide to do something with West Tonka schools, would you share that contract with us so we can sort of, not recreate the wheel?
Yeah, I'm sure that the city of Mound and the city of Orono would be happy to participate with the city of Minnetrista from their end of how they cooperated or forms they had to fill out. As far as the school district, we're happy to communicate anything that's helpful.
Well, I was hoping maybe you could speak to how time-consuming the forms are to fill out and report. Is it burdensome, or is it doable? Is it what's your perspective on that?
As far as what, I guess I would let the city of Mound and the city of Orono speak about on the city end. I know from a school district end, we're to be honest, a lot of this information is still seeking clarity and process as it goes forward. We're going to be putting that information into our own grants here that are coming up and due. And so, yeah, it does require some time in accounting. The Treasury did put some guidance that I think takes some of that burden off the city of some of the paperwork. But again, I would have the city of Mound or Orono speak about the labor intensiveness for a city.
Okay, thank you.
And Shannon, this is Colin again here. I do believe we discussed this in our meeting with the city of Mound, and they were going to confirm clarity on it. But I believe the Treasury allocated up to $500 per pupil, which basically would require the city to reconcile how many pupils were in the school district in which they were supporting with the CARES Act dollars. And so it's a far easier reconciliation for the city than it would have been to have some other formula to have an equitable donation to the cities. Up to 500, I think was the number.
And that's $500 per pupil that are Mound residents attending West Tonka School?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Lisa, if I
Hearing
can
none,
just,
then again.
Lisa, if I can just
Yeah.
add one more comment. The one thing I
Sure.
would encourage you guys to think about, again, just being on the ground floor of this from the start as a business owner, the only thing we know that's certain is uncertainty in this. And our business communities will be forever changed, maybe for the better, but likely not, at least in the short term. And there's a lot of things that can happen between now and, say, the end of 2021 with COVID-related issues at the legislative level, both state and federally. And the one thing that I think is important is that we do not replicate any services or benefits that are being provided by the state, county, or federal government. And that gets to be a tough place because there is a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts to this. So as you guys are thinking through that, I think that's something that's really important. We don't want to replicate services, and we don't want to put somebody in a better position than they were before COVID-19. We want to help them get back to the place they were.
All right. Thank you. All right. That concludes our special presentations for tonight. Thank you again, and we'll move on to persons to be heard. Mr. Baroni.
Yes, Madam Mayor, there's actually two persons to be heard for this evening, one of which I placed into the information packet because it was a very long email, and instead of trying to read it to you, I thought I'd put it in the info packet, so you could read it yourself. What I will do is just mention the person's name and briefly about the topic, and then maybe interject something at the end. So the first person to be heard is from Victoria Frazier. I don't have an address, so I can't give that to you. Sorry. Since it just came in via email. Her petition, she's interested in having the council revisit the dog barking ordinance. She said she has talked with city staff. She's got a neighbor who has a dog that barks constantly, according to her, waking her up, that kind of thing. So she has talked with Chief Falls. She has talked with Nick in our planning area. And so I think what I'll do, Mayor, to kind of take the council off the hook on this one, is to just, again, maybe speak with Chief Falls and Nick Olson or David Abel from our planning area and review this email with them and figure out, by contacting Ms. Frazier, what we can do to help with her situation. So if the council's okay with that, unless they have anything to add about this, if you had a chance to read it in your info packet, we can go on to our second one.
Council, any comments?
Yes, this is Shannon. I did read it, and I sympathize with her. And it seems like it might be a good idea to just have her record the dog barking on her cell phone, showing the location and the time, because it seems like the problem is getting a public safety officer over there to witness the whole thing. And I think that could easily take care of it. And then I would recommend giving a warning to the neighbor if it's occurring, and if they don't comply with the ordinance, issue a fine.
So that would be a question for Chief Falls. If a resident records something, is that evidence enough to issue a fine or a warning? I don't know if it is. And this, the problem, of course, that she cites in her letter is that the dog can be barking for, who knows how long. Even if she calls the police, by the time they arrive, and then they have to sit there and then record another 5 minutes of barking before they can even say that there's one infraction, let alone every evening or every other evening. So I guess maybe we could do one of two things. If they can impose a fine or a citation or a warning to the neighbor based on what you said, Ms. Bruce, a recording, they could do that. That might be one way to start. The other thing is, if they can't, is there some other avenue that could be pursued versus an ordinance change, or does the council want to at least look at it, a possibility of an ordinance change? Mr. Falls, Chief?
Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to comment on that. This is a situation I'm familiar with. I've had a number of conversations with this individual about this issue, and I too am sympathetic to the issue. That this does happen from time to time across our city. Our ordinance, so you know, is that's very standard language for an animal noise type of ordinance. And simply the requirement is that a dog be barking continuously for a period of time. And so that can be difficult to prove. If someone asked if they can record that, they certainly can. That was part of our conversation. Ultimately, a judge would decide if they feel that's proof enough. But what happens is it takes the burden off of the police, and it puts it on the person making the complaint. And if they're willing to do that and then go to court and testify to that effect, that certainly could be a successful way to prosecute it. But the fact is most people are not comfortable with that, so that's why they don't do it. But she certainly could if she was comfortable with that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Then it sounds to me maybe if you could have a conversation with this individual and see if that's the route she would like to go. Mr. Brony, is that kind of what you were inferring?
Like I said, it's a pretty long email. There's a lot of tentacles to this as far as who she's talked to and what she's talked about. I think we can talk tomorrow as a staff, whether it's, like I said, Mr. Abel or Mr. Olson and Chief Falls and myself, and then we can come back and talk to or have Chief Falls contact this individual. So if you're okay with that, we'll just kind of pursue it that way.
Well, also in your staff meeting, I think you should at least talk about, does our ordinance need to be reevaluated or relooked at? Is it difficult to address these types of issues when a police officer actually has to sit there for, I think it's 5 minutes, isn't it?
Madam Mayor, I can answer that. Like I said earlier, our ordinance is a very standard language for this type of issue. And the issue is, dogs bark from time to time. And unless you have some level of requirement that there be some continuous barking, it's really going to be almost impossible, or you'd be citing everyone when their dog lets out a bark here or there. And we've had extensive conversations with this homeowner, so they are kind of aware of that, as well as the ability to be able to record. I'd be happy to have another conversation and see if there isn't more that can be done. I think there might be some other factors here as well. So there's two sides to the story, and we can't get them to agree is kind of what's happening. So, but we'll keep working at it.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, Chief Falls, this is John. Is this in a rural area? Are there no other neighbors on the other side or whatever that are having the same issue?
Councilmember Trumperland, that's a good question. This is a fairly rural area. There are some other neighbors. I believe we've had a complaint from one additional neighbor, but most of them either don't think it's a big enough issue to report it or just don't want to get involved. And so that's where it's sitting. I think this individual is a little bit more outspoken and has had more of an issue with it.
They may be the closest residents to the barking as well.
Right, and it sounds like the dog owner has taken a number of measures to try and mitigate this, but not to the satisfaction of the neighbors. So again, we'll be happy to continue working and see what else can be done. I don't know that it would make much sense to change an ordinance based on one person, but we can certainly look and see how it compares to others as well.
All right. Okay. Anybody else?
This is Shannon. I just want to weigh in on the changing an ordinance for one person. I think that's a very good point, Chief Falls, and it doesn't warrant even looking into it for one person. I think if this was a large problem with multiple people in multiple neighborhoods, that'd be different, but I wouldn't recommend looking at changing an ordinance. So just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So you'll continue to work with the neighbors.
Yep.
Mr. Brony?
Yes, and we have one other person, first time that we've done it this way. So I think we need to make sure that we have a 3-minute timer, since that's been generally the rules for our persons to be heard segment. So Jim Reinholz, I don't know his address off the top of my head. I'm sure he can give it to us here in a second. He lives just down the road here from City Hall. I've spoken with Mr. Reinholz a few times in the past. It's been a while, but I do understand after speaking with him for a minute before tonight's council meeting that he did dial in and listen to our discussion about internet with Mr. Vos. So Mr. Reinholz, if you are ready to speak on the topic you wish to talk about, I think Mayor, if you're okay with that, we can let him speak.
Sure. Yeah, and Mr. Reinholz, you just need to state your address for the record as well. So go ahead.
Hope you can hear me.
We can.
Retired and kind of new to doing all these internet things. Yeah, I live on Northview Drive, 2915 Northview Drive, which, as Mike said, is just west of City Hall and then down towards Whaletail. And you may remember I was before the council back in June of 2019 and actually came before them asking them to help me work with Mediacom to get the internet service on Northview Drive. And I don't want to spend my 3 minutes on it, but I think I'll send everybody the email chain that shows over 9 months, Mediacom did everything they could possibly do to say no. And Mike referred to some of that. They measure their things, not like everybody else would down the road. They measure their things where they go around in circles with their cable to make sure that they don't hit that 15. But like I said, what I've heard from Mr. Vos, I think his name is pronounced, I'm sorry if I got that wrong.
Correct.
The important thing I heard from him was, and I had brought this up to the city staff, actually, Cassandra, that when you look at the contract with Mediacom, those maps override the 15 mile or 15 houses per mile. And I worked with contracts for 30 years for state government. Yes, specifics over rule generalities. And that, yeah, Mediacom continued to say that no, it didn't. That's an important issue because then I would say if you look at those maps, and I heard the conversation, everybody had trouble with those maps. I guess I've lived in Minnetrista for 30 years, and I can look. I know you probably don't have it before you, but on A2, the circle that they show that they're going to do service on includes Windridge, which is right off of 110, a little bit farther west of me, and also it includes Halsteads from Highland around. that they should have provided service by June 2019, January 2019, according to contract. There's no service from MediaCom on those roads. All you have to do is drive down the road and you won't see the cables in the air. So my contention is they're not in compliance with that contract. I was disappointed to hear Mr. Vos say that he wasn't asked to look at whether they were in compliance, because I would say the city needs to look at, are they in compliance? And they're not. They're not. They haven't met the compliance of those cities and those areas. And if you look at it, you will see that. There's penalties in that contract that I would say the city should be imposing. There's a daily penalty for not meeting the requirements of that contract, $1 penalty. The city should do it. There was a lot of conversation there about getting other people. Nobody else is going to come in. Nobody else is going to beg them to come in, look around cable companies, and he alluded to that. They cut up the map. They each go into their own area and they don't compete with each other.
Right.
I don't know.
So, Mr. Reinholz, right. I think we were talking about it and saying, yeah, we should be looking at it, whether they're in compliance or not. So that might be something that the council will be looking at here in the near future. So, yeah, I know you've had your issues with them, and we absolutely understand and wish we could be in a different position here today. So,
well, I hope you give me a few more time minutes, because you used some of my 3. Just
if you want an extra minute, go ahead. But you did have 3. Go ahead.
I requested from the city back last year that they provide me with the reports that MediaCom, according to the contract in section 7.5a, submit to the city quarterly reports. The city had none of those reports. Those should have been sent to them in 2015, 16, and 17. City said they had none. Cassandra said we have none of those reports. I also asked for the current strand map. You were talking about what have they done? They were required by that contract to give you those strand maps under section 3.9b. Cassandra told me back last summer, don't have those maps, never submitted them to us. I just submitted a request last week to the city, a data request for those exact same things. I haven't heard back from them. And I wonder, maybe Mike knows. Mike, do you have those items now? Have you gotten those from MediaCom?
Mr. Reinholz, I have no idea if we've got those. I didn't even know you made a data request. So those don't come.
You did know I made one a year ago, because Cassandra said she had talked about you about that.
Yeah, that I do know about. But the one you said just a few days ago is
So if you didn't have them a year ago and you don't have them now, what that tells me is the city is doing nothing to enforce that contract. They don't even get the information that MediaCom is required to send to them to enforce the contract. I heard all this discussion about getting information. I heard that a year ago. The city needs to move along from discussion. They should have had that information. It should require them to send that to it. Unfortunately, I mean, I worked for government for 30 years. I know that if it's not somebody's job to do it, it ain't going to be done. So I have some recommendations. I'm not sure how much time I have left because I'm not running it.
Well, you have no time. It's beyond the 3 minutes, Mr. Reinholz.
I don't. Okay. First thing I would
but
ask
if you could, could you put that in an email to the council so that we could all see it and have it in front of us? Because we will. That would be a good idea. We do want to limit it to 3 minutes, and you've had quite a few more than that. But we do want to hear your recommendations. So if you could send that to the city council in an email, then we can follow up. And I think we'll be following up with this.
How about 20 seconds and then I'll send it?
Okay.
10 seconds and then I'll send you an email. Number one, I think the council needs to do a resolution that says that they make a priority that all residents in the city of Minnetrista receive broadband. Number two, and some of this came up in the meeting, direct city staff to develop a plan to reach that goal. Number three, apply for grants. Those grants are out there. Cities talked about them and said, well, we probably won't get one.
Right, okay.
If you don't apply.
And any other recommendations?
Number 4, the city has funds in a cable account. Last time I looked, it was over $200,000. They come from PEG fees and franchise fees. I would say the city council should dedicate those funds to be used to subsidize the costs of bringing in broadband to Minnetrista, not to buy computers for the city, which is what they did a few years back. That's it. And I
Okay.
will send. Thank you for my time.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Any other persons to be heard, Mr. Baroni?
Mayor, we do not. That's it.
Okay. And so we will be discussing the internet issue again, hopefully in the near future. So with that, we'll move on to our consent agenda items, consisting of approval of our City Council regular meeting minutes from August 17th, 2020, approve our work session meeting minutes from September 8th, 2020, approve our regular meeting minutes from September 8th, 2020, approve our claims. E is approve appointment of election judges and absentee ballot board for the general election of November 3rd, 2020. And then F is a authorized state aid pay request for the Halstead Drive reconstruction project. And G is accept the St. Bonifacius proposed fire service pension increase for 2021. And H is approve agreement for the street sweeping. Are there any ones you wish to remove?
This is Shannon. I would like to remove E, the appointment of election judges and absentee ballot board members.
All right. Are there any other ones?
This is Councilmember Molitor. I'd like to remove item D.
Claims?
Claims,
Okay.
as well as item H.
And H is
Street sweeping.
approve agreement for street sweeping. Okay. All right. That then leaves us with A, council meeting minutes from August 17th, B, work session meeting minutes from September 8th, C, approval of our meeting minutes from September, regular meeting minutes from September 8th. We're going to skip D. We're going to skip E. And then F is a resolution to authorize state aid pay request for the Halstead Drive reconstruction project. We're going to skip, G, we're going to do accept St. Bonnie proposal for the fire service pension increase. Is there a motion to approve those items?
This is Pam. So moved.
All right. Ms. Mortensen made that motion. Is there a second?
This is Councilmember Molitor. I'll second.
Okay, I'm going to give it to Mr. Molitor. So Pam made that motion, and it was seconded by Mr. Molitor. So all those in favor will signify with aye. I'm going to vote aye, Lisa Whalen. And we're going to go to Pam.
Aye.
And John.
Aye.
And Mike.
Aye.
And Shannon.
Aye.
All right, motion passes 5-0. So we're going to move on to, let's do this. I think the election judges might be just slightly longer. So let's come back to that. Let's do the claims first. Mr. Molitor, you had a question on the claim?
Yes, this is similar to last time. On page 25 of our packet, there's an item paid for with the US Bank corporate card, building structure maintenance. It's a dog waste stations for a couple of locations we have. I'd like to have that put to the park fund, not the general fund, kind of for the same reasons that we talked about for the last item last meeting.
Mr. Grimm?
Yeah, that should be fine. I was sort of going back and forth on that one. I guess I wasn't sure if they were new stations or replacing old ones, but either way, it's probably fine to use the park dedication fund.
All right. Mr. Molitor, anything else?
That's all I had for that agenda item.
Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns on the claims by anybody else? Hearing none. Mr. Molitor, do you want to make a motion with that change?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Shannon, I'll
Second
second.
All right, Ms. Bruce seconded that. So all those in favor will signify with aye. I'll say aye, Lisa Whalen, and we'll move on to Ms. Bruce
Aye.
and Mr. Molitor
Aye.
and Mr. Trumperlin
Aye.
and Ms. Mortensen.
Aye.
So motion passes on the claims 5-0. So street sweeping, Mr. Molitor, you had a question?
Yes. Obviously, from our packet materials, we saw the prices, prices, I guess, for 2 years, and the lack of bids. And I'd like to have a discussion whether we do it now, or I guess the first thing I want to talk about it is would there be interest by the mayor and the rest of the council and staff to explore the possibility at some point in the near future to take this work in-house? I'm not totally opposed to what we see in the contract, but as was noted in the packet, the number of miles that we have done is growing as it has in the past. And I think if we did this in-house, we'd have some flexibility to be able to do some on-demand cleaning throughout the season if we needed to. Also would have some flexibility in terms of staff time to do this that I know we put in our contracts some pretty tight time frames. We would have a little more flexibility to do that. This is somewhat similar to what we did with the dust abatement process where we took that on in-house. And I guess if there's some consensus to explore that, it would probably require some work on the part of Mr. Grimm and Mr. Peters to do some analysis around not only the cost of the equipment, but also staff time. And then we could come back and see, in light of the bids, if that makes sense or not. But I would like to at least ask the question of the mayor and the rest of the council if that would be something that there'd be an interest in pursuing.
So I think it's a good idea to look at it, similar to what we did for our dust abatement, like you said. I'm not sure that we would have all that information ready to go by the time we need or equipment purchased and so on for the next street sweeping, because I think they have to do it in the fall and in the spring. So I could be wrong, but Mr. Peters? Okay.
I'm not suggesting that. We may, first of all, if there's an interest in doing this, then we would have to figure out how we would handle in the interim, and maybe we contract for next spring, and then, if we were going to move forward, we do it next fall. I'm not suggesting that we would not approve the contract, maybe just not in its entirety. But
Okay.
I understand that it would take some time to do that, and I don't want to rush this, and but I think this is a good time to at least consider that, because these are 2-year contracts. Yeah. And I remember the last one that we came through, and now this one, a little bit more concerned since we're not getting bids.
Okay. Yeah. So, in other words, you're recommending approving the contract for 1 year, maybe.
I would actually recommend maybe for next spring, that portion of the service, and then, we can evaluate after that. I would, not to minimize it, but I would think that a little time between Brian and Gary and a spreadsheet, you could probably put some analysis together, and I can't imagine that taking more than 6 months. I would think that we could come to some conclusion over the winter, and maybe not in time for the spring cleaning, but we certainly should be able to do something by the time for fall. And if not, we can approve another one-time contract. But I just don't want us to lock in for 2 years. I prefer not to even do 1 year, but I guess if again, I'm open for ideas as to how we do that, but I would like to hear, before we get into a lot of detail, if that's something that people are interested in pursuing.
Okay.
This is
Council?
Pam. This is Pam, and I'd just like to hear from Gary. Gary, do you see any reason that this shouldn't be something we should proceed with as far as just looking at?
Before Gary answers, I'm going to jump in just for a second, Gary. So Mr. Molitor was talking about terminating the agreement. In the agreement itself, it says the agreement may terminate, either party may terminate this agreement until the end date stipulated, or till either party provides written notice to the other at least 30 days prior to the desired termination date. So we can give a 30-day notice and get out of this at any time during this 2-year contract, if I read that correctly. The only other thing I'll stipulate, and Gary can talk about this because he'll probably know more about it than me, is that to buy a piece of equipment like this is going to be quite costly. I think you're going to have to go through a budget cycle. We did not, obviously, budget for that for 2021. So I think the earliest you'd be able to have a piece of equipment, if you did decide to go this route, would be for 2022. But Gary, if you want to chime in on this, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mike, Madam Mayor, Council. Yeah, it is something that we have definitely talked about between public works staff to do. Would not be a bad thing to look at. But like Mr. Baroni said, it is quite expensive. You're probably looking at an outlay of, for a new machine, you have a vac machine, which is probably going to run, 200 to 250,000, somewhere in that range, depending on which one you get. There are 3 or 4 different manufacturers and stuff like that. As far as time goes, it does not take that much time to do. For the city staff to do that spring and fall, to pull one guy to do it would not be bad if they had the machine. The nice thing about that is you could also do it periodically throughout the year, which it would be nice to do. I know a lot of other cities have sweeping programs. Your Eden Prairies, your Minnetonkas, your Maple Groves, they're on a continuous cycle where they're always sweeping, always picking up, keeping it out of the catch basins, keeping it out of the ponds, keeping it out of the lake. So it is a very good thing to do, to look at even in the future, even to do that once a month or similar to that. So as far as looking at it, I think Brian and I could come up with something, but to purchase it, I'm not exactly certain how fast you can get something like that. But I think, once it gets decided by the council, it's done, we order, we find something that we like, you guys like it, we get it, we order it. I'm assuming we could get it here pretty quickly. There's always training involved. I know that the last one, that when I was at Eden Prairie, they invited 2 guys down to the actual company in Waco, Texas, to go over to complete the team. They spent 4 days down learning how to not only run it, but clean it, maintenance it. And so, I mean, it's a very, very, and I think a lot do that. So if it's something that you're really want to about doing, let's go ahead and try for it and see what happens. And we can always go back to this contract. So I mean, it's not like we're out anything.
Well, it sounds to me like if there is a 30-day out clause, that there would be no harm in approving the contract, and then we would have some time to investigate this and to come back with some options for the council if that's the route they want to go.
This is
Mayor,
Shannon.
we could, well, I was just going to give a quick point of clarification. We've, I think the last few years we've paid for this activity out of stormwater, surface water funds. So that budget will be coming in October to look at for 2021. So we could sort of wrap this analysis into that budget discussion in October if the council would so like.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yeah. All right, Ms. Bruce?
I just wanted to ask, do cities ever share capital equipment like this? Because it seems like this is a big expenditure that the ROI on this is going to take quite a while to pay for itself. And I'd like to know that if Brian and Gary do take this on, and I'd like to know how many years is it going to take based on a contract like this that's going to increase going forward. How many years is it going to take to do that? But I'd recommend looking into other cities that might be able to share this equipment with us, because it's obviously something that we're not going to use every day.
Right. Well, I think all of those are valid points, and we could do all of that. So, and like Brian said, maybe that can be wrapped into our stormwater discussion, part of our budget. So, all right. Anybody else? Mr. Molitor?
No, I think if we can, I'm fine with moving ahead with this contract. We have the out clause. I just want to make sure that it's something we could look into. I understand it's a big expense, but this contract, we've approved a couple of them now in the time I've been on the council, and they end up being, $50,000 contracts, and you start adding those up over time, and it's probably not an immediate ROI, but I think it could, be financially feasible. So I think that'd be fine if we look at it in the stormwater surface discussion and approve this contract at this point.
All right. Again, just prefacing it that we can pull out within 30 days of the at any time within 30 days. All right. Anybody else?
This is Shannon again. I'd like to talk about why we didn't get other bidders on this. Gary, do you have any?
Yeah.
Why do you think we didn't get any bids on this?
Well, actually, Mr. Brony and I actually discussed this, and I did make some phone calls. I only got one company to answer at that time, and that was Dustbusters. I did ask, if we got the contract, which they did. I did send these out July 21st and wanted them back August 28th, giving them a month to go through it. And he was aware that Carefree Services is our vendor that we right now, and he is very good friends with the gentleman, and he did not want to bid against him. That is why he chose not to. I did get a call from Minnesota. I did get a voicemail back. I left messages for everybody else. Minnesota Street Works was the only one that returned my phone call, and they said right now they are very, very busy, and they just totally forgot about it. So if you would like to get like you stated in there, more contracts, I think they would bid, but it doesn't sound like the other ones. The other ones I left messages for and have not received even correspondence through email or through a voicemail. I don't know what's up with those companies.
I guess I'd like, if there is another company that you say is willing to bid, I think I'd like to see that. And if the per mile increase was just that of around inflation, I wouldn't worry about it. But this contract is going up over 11%, and in the per mile cost, and I think another bid might give us a better price.
Mayor and council, so point of clarification. So for this particular contract, what you have before you is all the vendors that applied. And so we need to decide, and that's why Gary put in there that council should accept this quote or ask staff to resolicit. We cannot just call somebody else and have them put in a quote and just add it to this because they missed the deadline. So to me, those are your choices. And I don't know if Mr. Beatty can comment on that if he's on the line or not, but I think the contract came and went. We got one in there, and if you want these guys, we vote for these guys. If you don't want these guys and want to reject it and say go out for bid again or go out for quotes again, we'll do that. But you can't just add somebody into the mix.
And I understand. Go ahead.
Well, Madam Mayor, this is Ron Beatty. I agree with that analysis. It's either accept this or reject all the quotes and then go back through the process. And of course, which you're free to do, the risk, of course, is that these folks might not even bid.
Or you might get three of them. Who knows?
Well, and of course, everybody's now seeing the cards. So, it's always the risk of rebidding.
So I understand that sentiment, Councilmember Bruce, of wanting to add somebody in, but technically we can't just throw them into this particular go around. We'd have to start over.
No, I wasn't suggesting adding them in. I was suggesting starting over.
Okay, that's perfectly doable. If that's what the council as a whole wants to do.
Yeah.
This is Pam. If they none of these other companies submitted a bid on a deadline that was, to me, very fair, and it gave them a lot of time. Do we really, really trust them to do the job when we have somebody that's been doing this for a number of years and has worked well with the city? We know the work that they do. I just would question going with anybody else at this point that didn't even have the time to fill in a quote.
Okay. Mr. Chamberlain?
I would agree with Ms. Mortensen. I look back at the 2018 when we bid it the last time, and two of the four that responded to that were way off the map with their bids. Minnesota Streetworks was close to Carefree at the time, and Dustbusters at that time didn't respond back then either. While I don't particularly like the 18% increase from the 2020 to the 2021 numbers, as they're the only one that bid, and we've had them and they've done a good job, I would say, one, approve this contract. We got a 30 to 30 day capability of canceling in the future, and agree with Mr. Molitor. Let's investigate, analyze to see what a purchase and how we could use that equipment and get a return on it.
All right. Mr. Molitor?
Yeah, the other concern I have going out now, and it goes to the point that Mr. Beatty made about the cards have been played. Well, Carefree Services has been good. These notes are public and it's already been out there, and they're going to be able to see if they're solicited again that no one else responded. That kind of gives them carte blanche to even come back with a higher bid because they would see no competition. I'm not suggesting they would do that, but there's nothing preventing them from doing that, and I'm a little bit concerned about that. So I think, and that's why I made the suggestion I did, that we can take this contract, and if we need to do a 30-day out, we can do that, and look at taking it in-house so that we can potentially, if we continue to see these kind of increases, that makes our ROI that much better and quicker. So I get the concern, but I'm also concerned that we could be taken advantage of here pretty easily because these cards have been played.
Yeah. All right. So with that, is there a motion to approve this contract then?
This is Mike. I move that.
Okay, Mr. Molitor made the motion, and Mr. Chamberlain seconded that. All right, thank you, John. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none then, all those in favor signify with aye. Ms. Bruce?
No.
And Mr. Molitor?
Aye.
Mr. Chamberlain?
Aye.
Ms. Mortensen?
Aye.
And I, Lisa Whalen, vote aye. Motion passes 4-0. Bruce, nay. All right, so now we'll move on to the back to number E, the election judges. Ms. Bruce, I think you had a question.
Thank you. I was hoping that Ms. Lindquist might be able to help the council understand exactly what the process is when we have mail-in ballots, and we also have walk-in absentee voting at City Hall. And with election judges, I understand what they do, and if council has questions, feel free to ask those. But specifically about the absentee ballot board, can you explain how walk-in absentee balloting works when the person comes in to do that in person at City Hall, and who handles the ballot and who accepts or rejects it, and if people actually put the ballot in the voting machine like they do on election day? But if you could just walk us through how that works, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, well, I think,
hold on.
Ellie, maybe.
Ellie, I'll explain the process if that's okay.
Go for it,
Ellie?
Chris.
Okay. In answer to your question, Councilmember Bruce, it's two actual different processes. The city does not handle mail-in balloting. If the county sends out a ballot to a resident, they're instructed to mail it back to the county. If we receive one at City Hall, we usually just courier it down to Hennepin County and let them handle it since they were the ones that sent it out. Now, the process for in person, when a resident comes into City Hall to vote, they go into, right now we're having election judges do it. In the past, we've had staff do it, but since we're short-staffed, we are having some election judges do this. They come in, you have to fill out an application as you would to get a mail-in ballot. The process is basically the same as mail-in, but you're doing it in person. So they fill out the application. The judge or staff person puts it into the SVRS system, and what that is the state database for our elections. And then what happens is the labels are printed out, and there's two labels, one for the application and one for the envelope. At that point, the judge will give the voter their ballot. They go over, they vote their ballot, they fold it up and put it inside a brown secrecy envelope. They seal that. Then they put it inside the white envelope, and they seal that. They bring it back over to, excuse me, the election judge, and the election judge or staff person is the witness that the person did put their ballot, that they witnessed that they put the ballot in the white envelope. At that point, they put it inside. Right now we have it's like a drop box. It's a big circular cylinder with a lock on it. And then the person leaves. Every 5 business days for right now until we get closer to the election, the ballots need to be taken out of that cylinder. And the process that the city does is all they do is they compare, they need to be separated into precincts, and then they take the application and they compare it to the envelope. And if they're the same name and address, they look at the last 4 digits of their social security number or their driver's license. And if the voter fails to do that, then they look at the signature. And if they match, then at the bottom of the ballot, there's a section where you can accept or reject it. And that's where you would check accept. And then the 2 ballot board members would initial it. At that point, I would take the ballot and scan it into the SVRS system so that it's been accepted. So if somebody was tracking their ballot, it would be accepted at that point. Then it would get put into a transfer case. It would be sealed by the board, the absentee ballot board, which would more than likely consist of 2 people. We don't need a lot of people doing it. 2 people is generally what we use. And then that gets sealed. It gets couried. What happened? Excuse me, one step back. I fill out a form to Hennepin County, and I put one. It's a form that says how many ballots are inside the box. 2 copies go down with that. And excuse me, the driver has to sign off stating that they took it. And then when it gets down to Hennepin County, they open up that box and count how many ballots they received and email that back to me, stating they received the same number that I sent them. And then at that point, Hennepin County opens the ballot, and I don't know for sure if they do it immediately or what their process is, but they're the ones that open the ballots, open the brown envelopes, and run them through the ballot counter. The city has nothing to do with that. The only time the city deals with the ballots themselves is during that 7-day direct balloting period right before elections.
Okay. And
did I explain that okay? Or
yes,
are there questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you did. So I guess I just wanted to confirm that. So when you send the ballots to the county, they've already been accepted or rejected. And the county is not doing that on any of the ballots that come from you. They're just counting them and running them through the scanner.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I send them a report. There's some reports that SVRS will generate for us. You know, for any specific day, we can find out how many are, we can tally up how many people actually voted on that day. We, of course, don't know who they voted for or anything like that. We just know we had that many registered or
Sure.
non-registered voters on that day. And that's how I double check, before I send it down to Hennepin County, I double check with that report to make sure I'm sending them the number they say I should be sending them.
Okay, and then the process for the few days before the general election, does that change from this process, or is it the same?
Well, it changes a little bit because what happens is those ballots get taken out every night of the ballot counter, because there is a count on the ballot machine that doesn't get cleared out every night. It's a continuation counter. So there is a report that I have to fill out from Hennepin County, and what happens is, and this is where I usually have, you have two people take out the ballots in the evening, and it gets separated by precinct. And then I just run a report from the SVRS system. I have to enter some numbers into a Excel spreadsheet with, how many from each precinct ballots that I received. And then I get the report from the from the state, and if that matches the Excel spreadsheet, however they calculate it, will tell me it matches, and then we keep those. We put them in I put them in an envelope and I seal it, and then I keep it in a transfer case, and that is kept in our secured vault room. And then if we do get audited after the election, those would get taken also in account to that audit. So I'd have to bring those down to Hennepin County.
So does the voter actually? Sorry, does the voter actually put the ballot in the counter themselves?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They do. So
okay.
They come in and they still have to fill out the in-person absentee application, and then the judge will hand them their ballot. They go vote, and then they go slide it in the machine, and they can watch it be accepted, and they can watch their, the continuous number go to the next number. so they know that their ballot counted.
Okay.
And then
That's helpful, and that's very helpful, and thank you for just walking us through that. This process is different than it's been ever before, and I think it's important that we understand what is happening, and I'm thankful for your explanation. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
Right. You're welcome. And you know, the days that things are being they're changed a little bit due to COVID, for times that we have to get it down to Hennepin County, but the process is still the same. So.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Bruce, did you have any other questions?
No, that's all.
All right.
Well, I've got a real quick question. This is Pam.
Sure.
So Chris, I was an election judge, and it's been a number of years, but when people come in, they give their address. At what point does the person that did an earlier vote, an absentee vote, does their name get crossed off on the list as people come in and give their address? You know what I mean?
Okay, so since it's been a while, you said, since you've been an election judge, which is true, because now there is in the system, in the SVRS system that we log into the state, it will tell us if there's been a ballot that's been issued already. So
okay.
Right now what our problem is the county has not sent out the mail-in ballots yet. And so anybody that's coming in right now, we have to go in and spoil their ballot that was going to get mailed to them, and then reissue them a new one. They just get a new,
Yep, for the ballot, for the mail-in. They get a new mail-in, basically. Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, they don't get a new mail-in. They get what they'll still have to fill out the application at City Hall, but what they'll able to do, then they vote at City Hall, and then, so then that record is gone completely. So there's no way that it could be voted twice. So then what happens is, since we said that they voted at City Hall, if somebody else tries to come in and vote, or if they try to come in and vote again, if it's not in that accepted state, then we could cancel that ballot. We'd have to go find that ballot before it goes, because once it goes to Hennepin County, it's pretty much, you can't vote, you can't spoil that ballot and revote. Well, I shouldn't say revote, but, do a replacement ballot.
No, I was talking if they hadn't received it in the mail yet, so. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So they get a replacement ballot, and then, so there's only one record in the system. So if somebody does try to come in or something like that, it will show up in the system when their name gets pulled up. Does that Does that answer your question, Councilmember Mortensen?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. All right. So that remains to approve the appointment of the election judges and absentee ballot board for the general election, November 3rd, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right. A motion has been made by Ms. Bruce. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Pam.
All right. Ms. Mortensen seconded that. So all those in favor will signify with aye. Ms. Mortensen?
Aye.
Ms. Bruce?
Aye.
Mr. Molitor?
Aye.
Mr. Trumperlin?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Lisa Whalen. Motion passes 5-0. So great education on our voting process. Thank you very much. So now that concludes our consent agenda items. We'll move on. We have no public hearings, so we will move on to our business items. First one is approved professional services agreement for the 2021 street improvement project. Ms. Falski, is that you?
Madam Mayor, we have Adam. I think Adam will present that item.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gabois.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. Well, I think you guys have me for the next 3 business items, so hang in there. This is a proposal for professional services for the 2021 street improvement project, which has been named city project number 02-21. And we
oh my God.
What? Chris?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mute your phone.
Are you okay?
I was going to say, what did I say?
Yeah, I'm okay. No. I'm sorry.
We got the wrong project name. All right.
All right.
So,
Adam.
Yeah, like I was saying, 2021 street improvement project. We briefly started talking about this at the last council meeting, but we're bringing it back here as there were some revisions. And so tonight, the issue in front of you is authorizing the professional services agreement. Like I said, we talked about this, the city council talked about this at the last city council meeting, but really these discussions started back in August. And the city council gave some direction to city staff on proceeding with the 2021 street improvement project, obviously with the goal of kind of continuing the successful streets program that's been going on for a number of years now. The city council, along with engineering and public works, is looking at the streets to be included in the 2021 street improvement project would be Hardscrabble Circle, Hardscrabble Drive North, Loring Drive, Stonebridge Road, and Minneapolis Avenue. This is just over 2 miles of streets that are going to be included in this project. As many members of the council are aware and residents of the community, these streets are in very rough condition. We do rate them with a pavement condition index, and they've got an average of 47. That was data obtained in 2017, so we know that number has actually gone down. So in the 2021 street improvement project, what we're proposing to do is basically rebuild that pavement section by doing a full depth pavement reclamation and repaving, which is a similar scope to what the city has done in the past number of projects. The opportunity there is, when you're reconstructing the streets, is also to take a look at the public infrastructure. So that's the sanitary sewer, the water main, and the storm sewer, and do some repairs or replacements to that as needed while you do have that street opened up. So with this project, there'll be some minor repairs and enhancements to the stormwater infrastructure, as well as looking at kind of how these roads drain. If there's some local boulevard drainage issues, those will be addressed as well. There will be some minor repairs to the water main. There's not a whole lot of water main in these streets, but on Stonebridge there is. And the bigger utility component would be replacing a 4-inch force main that is underneath Hardscrabble Road North. And similar to this year's project, we know that condition of that pipe is not very good, and so we want to get that replaced with a PVC style pipe. There's some complexities to this project as well. In the Hardscrabble area, there is a nature conservancy, which is, I think, a great benefit for those residents there. Kind of the road encircles this area. It physically encircles it, but if you look at the plat, it doesn't quite align. And so we're taking this opportunity to clean up the right-of-way and obtain a roadway easement, so the city has an easement where the actual road is. And there's been some preliminary discussions with the Nature Conservancy, and they are looking forward to cleaning that up as well. So this proposal includes preliminary design, preparation of feasibility report, plan specifications, and bidding services. So taking the project all the way from the beginning, we start having a neighborhood meeting, all the way through design and bidding and looking at awarding a contract for the project. Speaking of a neighborhood meeting is one thing that's just key to these street improvement projects. We've heard from a lot of residents over the years who have have issues with the road or concerned with the road, and obviously document those, and that's why we're here tonight talking about these streets. But we want to get folks together, likely virtually, but potentially in person or on site, and we can also meet with residents as needed to look at specific issues, but to hear about what the issues are with the streets, talk about the proposed improvements and what the process and schedule is going to look like. And it's always very good to do that before developing a feasibility report. And I mentioned the feasibility report, that is a requirement of the Chapter 429 process, which we'd be following with this project, because as we'll talk about shortly, a portion of the funding would be assessments to those benefiting property owners. So staff recommends going forward with these streets and dubbing them the 2021 Street Improvement Project. The city has a budget for street improvements for 2021 of $700,000. There's a year-end fund balance with the current road maintenance fund, and on the consent agenda tonight was a state aid reimbursement. So those funds are also proposed to be used to fund this project. So the total project cost, that includes the construction, a contingency, and all the indirect costs, would be around 1.65 million. And obviously that'll be refined as we work towards preliminary design, and there'll be a feasibility report number with a detailed cost estimate. In the packet, there is an error in this next paragraph, but an updated agenda item was sent out to the councils. We do apologize for that. This was revised, and the number there was missed, but you can see that the proposal for professional services includes quite a bit, and maybe you notice it's more than previous years, but there are some specialty things with this project, such as the right-of-way services, the wetland delineation, and so on and so forth. But the breakdown is included in your packet with a fee estimate and the number of hours we estimate for each staff working on this project. We have a lot of specialties involved. The total not to exceed proposed fee is $121,548. Part of that fee was approved at the previous meeting as well. That was for the wetland delineation, and we just wanted to get started on that. We'll have staff out within the next week to get those wetlands delineated before the growing season has ceased. In alignment with years past, we wouldn't propose any construction phase services at this time. We'd like to wait to see if the project goes forward and if the city council considers award of the contract. So I can take any questions on this project prior to the city council action.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gekba. Council, questions? I'm going to start with Mr. Molitor. Do you have any questions?
No, not really. I think everything is in line with what we had talked about previously. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chumperland. Okay, Ms. Mortensen or Ms. Bruce?
I don't.
I just have a quick question. If the virtual neighborhood meeting's on October 5th, so I would imagine the letters are going out really soon?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Mortensen. Yep, we're waiting on obviously tonight, and we will be getting those letters out as soon as possible. We have the mailing list generated, and so we're just ready to basically send those out within the next couple of days and try to get as much advance notice as we can. We've put October 5th out there to do it obviously during the work session, and we realize it is a tight turnaround with this proposal coming now, but with that kind of late minute add to the streets, we are hoping that we get some good attendance there, whether it's virtual, and of course, as I mentioned, we'll always make time to take phone calls from residents, and if we don't have a good turnout for some reason or another, we can always consider reaching out additionally not necessarily hosting another meeting, but making sure that we have a frequently asked questions and plenty of project information for people to consider, and then staff contact information for us to answer personal questions that maybe they didn't get an opportunity to ask at a neighborhood meeting.
Maybe what we could do with that, maybe what we could do with that letter is also let people know that they have the opportunity of calling and maybe talking. I'm not sure if it would be with you, Adam, or with staff, but somebody, so they could get some of their questions answered. The other thing I think would be really helpful if we knew how many people would be interested in attending a virtual meeting. How many, I mean, are we talking 50 people? That would be kind of hard, I think, to manage. Or are we talking 10 people, or are we, and so on. The other thing I think that would be hard to manage is, since these are 4 different streets, all kind of different, it could take a very long time to get through all of that and to talk about each street and what the issues are and how we're going to be addressing them. I mean, it just seems a bit unwieldy to me. I don't know if we have to do separate meetings, but I'd hate to do 4 separate meetings, but it just seems one big meeting just is a bit unwieldy. How many people, how many properties, do we know how many properties would be involved?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have the number of properties right in front of me, but we're talking for sure 40 or 50, maybe even more. With adding Minneapolis, there's quite a number on there. So there's a good chance, we do get a large turnout, and we have been hosting these, virtual neighborhood meetings, not necessarily in Minnetrista, but I know some of my colleagues have, and we can reach out to them for how they've gone and what successes they've had. There's opportunities to say, hey, we're going to give a description. Luckily, the scope is very similar on all these projects, though they are geographically, well, really Minneapolis is kind of the outlier, but the other 3 are pretty close by. The scope is very similar. So explaining the construction and answering frequently asked questions would apply to most residents. And then we could do something like, we're going to answer 10 questions or 20 questions, and then we're going to have anyone who didn't get their question answered, reach out personally to city staff to get that answered. And we can include that correspondence in a appendix in the feasibility report, which is standard, so that we have record of that resident communication.
Yeah, it might be a good idea even to have them ask their questions ahead of time, so we kind of know how many, although they may not know the questions until they hear the scope of the project and kind of get a feel for the project. So yeah, I just want to make sure that we give all the residents an opportunity to weigh in or to make their comments. All right. Anybody else? Otherwise, I guess there's 2 questions here. Do we want to go ahead with the October 5th virtual open house? Are you okay with that? I'll just ask. So we would send out a letter as soon as possible, explaining what the virtual open house is and how it's conducted. Could they call ahead or talk to staff ahead of time, or would you prefer they talk to staff after the open house? I guess that would be a question for Adam.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation, and we should certainly put that in the letter, and we'd be happy to take those questions either phone call or email and have the question and a response ready to go, and we could run through those first, and since those folks reached out initially, and then see what our time limit is on this meeting and continue to answer questions as they come in live as well. There are ways to basically host a webinar so that the folks who are joining can not theoretically but kind of virtually raise their hand And
Right.
so we can set that up and do it that way. It is going to be clunky. It's not the best way we like to do it, but that's why we're going to make ourselves available to meet with folks on site if needed, or just, always be ready to receive any questions or communications that the residents may have. We also have that other opportunity at the public hearing to take information from residents that maybe wasn't included in the feasibility report and still be able to incorporate that into final design.
All right. All right. So is council comfortable with the October 5th virtual meeting, staff sending out a letter ASAP, and also asking residents to pre-submit some questions so we can be prepared for that, but also offering and making it clear in the letter they would also have the opportunity to ask questions at the meeting as well. Are you okay with that? I'll go down the line. Pam, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, Mike Molitor?
I do have one question. Given the timing of that, are we going to have any dollar figures in that letter for potential assessment amounts? That's going to be probably the question, the most frequently asked question.
Right.
Thank you, council member. Yeah, we have left that out of the letter in the past. We've been able to provide a range in the presentation.
Okay, that's fine. It doesn't have to be in the letter. It's probably best. I would agree with that. Just I want to make sure that come October 5th, we know that's going to be probably the most frequently asked question or first question asked. I just want to make sure that we're going to be in a position by October 5th to give at least obviously that won't be an exact amount because we don't have bids or anything, but people want to know a ballpark range, and you can say that as a ballpark range, but we've got to be prepared. If we're prepared to answer that question, it doesn't have to go out in the letter. That's fine, but just be prepared. As long as you're comfortable with that, then I'm fine with October 5th.
All right. And Mr. Trumperlin?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Bruce?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
All right. So you'll send out that letter sooner than later. The only other question I have is, since there may be we don't know, do we want to start the meeting at 5 versus 5:30? Otherwise, we may run up against a time crunch. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Mayor, I think we'll take a look at that staff level, but I think that's probably a pretty darn good idea. I think if we would start at 5 and knowing that sometimes our work sessions go till 7 anyway, that gives us an hour potentially with residents on this open house. And then I know Mr. Grimm's going to have one item to discuss for sure, budget related, and that would probably allow us roughly an hour for that as well. So,
okay.
But yeah, I think a 5 o'clock start, it's better than an additional night or a different night. So.
Well, yeah, I think we should do the neighborhood open house first, and then if we have time, we'll have to. Then the remainder of the time, then we could do the work session with budget discussion. Otherwise, we may have to move the budget discussion to our next work session and also start earlier so we can get more in that work session.
Okay. We've noted that.
So is that, yep. So we're okay with the 5 o'clock start time. Is that an issue for any council members? All right. So we'll do a 5 o'clock start time. All right. With that, then we'll move on to the resolution to approve the professional service agreement for the 2021 street improvement project. Any questions on that? All right. Is there a motion then to approve the professional service agreement for the 2021 street improvement project CP02-21?
So moved. This is Councilmember
All right.
Molitor.
Yep. Thank you. Mr. Molitor made that motion. Is there a second?
This is John. I'll second.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Chamberlain seconded that. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none then, all those in favor will signify with aye. I'll start with Ms. Bruce.
Aye.
And Mr. Chamberlain,
Aye.
Mr. Molitor,
Aye.
and Ms. Mortensen.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Lisa Whalen. Motion passes 5-0. So now we'll move on to our professional service agreement for the MSA Sunnyfield Road project. Mr. Adam, I believe that's you again.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Thank you. 1 down, 2 to go.
Yeah.
This is the proposal for professional services for the 2021 MSA Municipal State Aid Street Improvement Project, dubbed City Project Number 01-21. And in keeping with this year's tradition, we're focusing on proposing a local street improvement project and also a MSA street improvement project, and utilizing those funds provided by the state to improve some roadways within town as well. So this project, Sunnyfield Road, has been discussed for quite a long time, and really there's been a lot of conversation about it, a lot of preliminary work and discussions, just being that it is a highly used route by obviously the school district, and it is also in pretty rough shape. So what this professional services proposal includes is designing the preliminary design, the feasibility report as well, the specifications, final design, and bidding administration for improving this roadway. The work that's proposed is again a full depth reclamation of the existing pavement, which is in pretty rough shape. The pavement condition index is hovering right around there in the mid 40s for Sunnyfield Road. There is a segment that's slightly higher, but ultimately it's in full degradation and it does require replacement. The project also includes one local road due to its proximity to Sunnyfield Road, Langwood Drive. As you can see in the agenda item, it is quite a bit higher in the PCI rating of 79.6. And so the work proposed on Langwood is a mill and overlay. So keeping the pavement there, but taking off the gradient top portion and paving a new layer, and then also doing some spot replacement of the existing concrete curb and gutter that's there, and we'll correct some of those panels that have heaved or cracked or are otherwise degraded. So focusing back on Sunnyfield Road, there's been a number of discussions and a traffic study conducted and discussed with the school district, and as well as public safety officers. And basically there's a need for some improvement in how traffic flows, definitely during pickup and drop off times, and entering their one very large main parking lot. And so the proposed improvements include adding a left turn lane at the eastern entrance to the school, and also looking at enhancing the pedestrian crossing system there. There's a lot of movement back and forth to utilize the fields to the north, and currently it's no ped ramps. It's really just striping, and it's in everyone's best interest to come up with it and improve the pedestrian crossing facilities there. So that'll be looked at with the feasibility and preliminary design. There is a small section of city trail along the south side of Sunnyfield Road that needs to be improved as well. So we're going to incorporate that work into the improvements. And it really just, that's going to couple nicely with improving the pedestrian crossing movements across Sunnyfield as well. So these are obviously proposed for 2021 construction. We're really keeping with that theme of a local project and a state aid project, and the council has been focusing on improving these roadways. So this continues with that goal. The preliminary budget or construction estimate or total project estimate for this project is $775,000. Quite a bit of that is for this turn lane because instead of just reconstructing the street to its existing geometry, now you're widening it and you're having to do some additional excavation and reconstruction of a new segment of roadway. So that earthwork and that moving does add quite a considerable cost. The proposed fee to provide the preliminary design, feasibility report, final design, and bid documents and the bidding services is the not to exceed basis in the amount of $61,840. And you can see the breakdown there as well as the included fee spreadsheet of the folks that would be proposed to work on this project and the amount of time estimated to complete it. Similar with the local project, we would wait to propose on any construction phase services, inspection or geotechnical or testing, and just to go forward with the project. Wait to see if the City Council considers award of the project. So this is a long-awaited project. We're excited about this one, and I'd stand for any questions on this proposal for the design of this Sunnyfield Road.
All right, any questions, Council?
This is Shannon. I have a question. The professional services agreement, the $61,000, is that coming out of our MSA funds, or part of it coming out of the road fund, or are we splitting that up somehow because it's not all for MSA roads?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Bruce. Yeah, the design is reimbursable from MSA. In terms of breaking out the portion for Langwood Drive, the mill and overlay, I don't know off the top of my head if we need to specifically break out those design costs. I don't believe so, and maybe Allison has the answer. If not, we can definitely look into that as this, prior to this getting too deep into it. But the most of the construction costs are for that Sunnyfield, and so the design and all the indirects associated with that are eligible for MSA.
Okay, that's good.
Adam, you're gonna have to break out though the Langwood, and we were gonna do that as an alternate bid. So do we have a preliminary budget for just the Sunnyfield portion of it?
I had Langwood in front of me here, if you bear with me. I think Langwood Mill and Overlay is just around, just under 100,000 is our budget estimate for that right now. Yeah, my Excel's loading up. I don't have the specific number, but I believe it's right around 100,000, and we can certainly include that as a bid alternate to the project. You're going to get really favorable costs for that at this time, obviously with its proximity to Sunnyfield. And though the work isn't that intensive, it is nice to have it done because it does come off of Sunnyfield Road. And so, to come back at a later time and do that once Sunnyfield's already been reconstructed, just you have some construction traffic on the newly constructed roadway. So.
Yeah, we had just
Madam
talked
Mayor?
about it at our last meeting. Yes?
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
I have the budget number for Langwood was 126,000.
Okay, so roughly 125. Okay, thank you. I think we had talked about it last time, just said we can always bid it as an alternate. We wanted to see where Sunnyfield came in and where all the other ones came in. And if we couldn't afford it right now, unfortunately, we'd have to come back. But if we could, then we could go ahead and do it. So I think we need to have that bid as an alternate. So I understand your rationale. I don't disagree, but we also need to make sure we have funding for it.
Certainly.
All right. And then my only other question is the price tag of $225 for the turn lane. Is that, I think we need to at least think about that and also maybe talk with the school district. Is that something they still want included in this? Because I don't know that we had given them a number. I think originally we were looking at somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 for the project, and now it's kind of ballooned up to this 775, maybe taking out one. So we're still looking at 650. So it's still fairly higher than what we had originally anticipated. Is that something we need to talk to the school district on first?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We will have to obviously communicate with the school district through preliminary design, even really as we get started with the feasibility. We will be following Chapter 429. The project, or it's proposed to follow that, so that the benefiting properties, which would be the school district, could be assessed, and so that would be part of the discussion, and the feasibility report and ongoing discussions here as we work into this project will need to determine that turn lane improvement and those pedestrian crossing facilities. What is the cost? Is there a cost share between the city and the accessible, the benefiting property owners? Is it all on the benefiting property owners? Well, we're going to have to navigate that and communicate that as a city and with the school district.
All right. I just don't want to get too deep into the design process and spend more money, and then the school district might say, well, we really think the cost is just more than we would want to pay, or something like that. So I'm just kind of wondering if prior to getting into, and like I said, too detailed or too much into the design process, if we need to have that conversation with the school district.
I thought we already had this discussion with the school district. It was their request, and I thought someone had already given them the number. Because we've had that 225 number for quite some time now. I mean, I don't think we just sat on it, right? I mean, we shared this with the school district, correct?
Madam Mayor?
Yeah. Go ahead, Allison.
So in the traffic study, included in the traffic study was some high-level cost estimates for both a turn lane, and if council recalls, there was also a discussion of a mini roundabout, which was not palatable for the school district or for the council. And so that high-level estimate for that turn lane, that 225, was included in the traffic study. So we've seen that number has been before the school district. As far as, and the school district is aware of the city's assessment policy, and they've looked at understanding that they're the only benefiting property owner along this corridor. They understand that they would be looking at, based on the city's assessment policy, 50%. Certainly, if the council wants to vary from that, that's the council's prerogative to look at that. But I believe we've communicated to the best of our abilities, the high-level budget costs for this scope of project.
All right, thank you for that clarification. All right, with that, any other questions? All right, then, is there a motion to approve the professional services agreement for the MSA Sunnyfield Road project?
This is John, so moved.
All right, Mr. Tremplin made that motion. Is there a second?
This is Shannon, I'll second.
All right, Ms. Bruce seconded that. So any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor?
No, hold on.
Yep.
No, hold on.
Yep.
This is Councilmember
Right.
Molitor. As I've stated in the past, I just do not believe that having gravel parking on the side of this road is a good idea. I think aesthetically it's going to look awful. And given how much we're spending on that, it's I think a bad idea. However, I do realize that the road does need to be reconstructed, and I'm not going to hold it up because of that. But I think we're making a mistake by not adding paved parking in this scenario. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? Hearing none then, all those in favor will signify with aye. I'll start with Mr. Molitor.
Aye.
And Mr. Trumperlin.
Aye.
Ms. Bruce.
Aye.
Ms. Mortensen.
Aye.
And I vote aye, Lisa Whalen. So motion passes 5-0. So we move on now to approve the change order for number 3 for the 2020 local street improvement project. Mr. Gadbois, that's you again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we've made it to the last one. Thank you for bearing with me. I'll discuss this one here. This is change order number 3 for the 2020 street improvement project, which is substantially completed. The contractor is working on punch list items right now, and you know, that just means restoration, you know, fixing some mailboxes or irrigation systems that may have gotten missed, and general site cleanup. So we're happy to be at this point in the project, and the residents have been phenomenal to work with. They're very communicative as an HOA, and we've appreciated that, and they've just been great. So very successful project, and we do just have a change order here of some things that had come up during construction, not necessarily recently, but this is kind of a culmination of things that have come up that were kind of unknown and caused some extra work for the contractor during construction, which is to be expected. And one thing that we've learned with this project is when you get close to the lake, there's a lot of history and a lot of interesting things that may have gone on. There was a tunnel underneath of Shady that was constructed out of fieldstone. So pretty unique stuff. But this change order encompasses 4 separate extra work requests. So we've bundled them all into one, and I'll just run through them really quickly. A water service was hit that wasn't located, so they had to do a repair on that water service. There were some old clay pipes way down at the sanitary sewer force main level that might have run between the old creamery and the home. We're not quite sure. That were abandoned, but those were hit and had to be repaired or plugged as directed, so there was some extra work there. A gate valve was needed to be added onto the new force main, and because of the digging conditions with being close to the lake and the groundwater, it just was kind of a hassle for the contractor to have to go and do that, so there's costs associated with that. And then the 4th work request was actually there's a valley gutter, which is basically a flat concrete curb that crosses the boat launch access. And that was the area where we got a lot of feedback from residents, and looking at design, that there was a lot of blow by with the stormwater, and so we added this valley gutter to help convey that into the drainage ditch. And we realized while we were constructing, a lot of people use that boat ramp. Almost everyone there has a jet ski, and they're going in and out, and so it was decided to switch that concrete to a high early strength concrete, so that it was ready to be used by the residents the next day. So the costs for change order number 3 would be included in pay voucher number 4. The total cost for change order number 3 is $12,513.61. Increases the contract from $727,655.15 to $740,168.76. And so staff would recommend approving this change order to compensate the contractor for the extra work that they incurred.
Thank you, Mr. Gadbois. The only question I have is, I'm assuming that the gate valve and the hit and repaired water service, that those 2 costs come out of the sewer and or water fund. Is that correct?
Yes. So I'll work with Mr. Grimm on where exactly those costs are funded from, and that's a great point. Those are definitely attributable to sewer and water funds.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else have questions? All right. Hearing none, then is there a motion to approve the change order number 3 for the 2020 local street improvement project?
This is Pam. So moved.
All right. Motion has been made by Ms. Mortensen. Is there a second?
This is John. I'll second.
All right. And Mr. Chamberlain made that second. So any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor will signify with aye. I is Lisa Whalen. I vote aye. Mr. Molitor.
Aye.
And Mr. Chamberlain?
Aye.
Ms. Bruce?
Aye.
And Ms. Mortensen?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. So we move on to our next item, which is approve our conditional offer of employment to Darcy Atkinson for the position of the Customer Service Communications Assistant. I believe that's Ms. Paulfos. Are you on?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. I'll try and be short and sweet tonight. Tonight, the council is being asked to approve an offer of employment for Darcy Atkinson as the Customer Service and Communications Assistant. Anisha Mueller left the city on August 28th, and advertising for the vacant position closed on August 26th. At that point, we received 30 applications for this position. 5 candidates were interviewed, and first round interviews held on September 2nd. From there, 2 final candidates were interviewed on September 9th, and Ms. Atkinson emerged as the final candidate. The Personnel Committee then met on September 16th and provided me direction to continue with the contingent segment of the process, which includes a full background investigation and credit check to the satisfaction of our police department. In your packet, there's some information about Ms. Atkinson's career, but she has worked as an office manager in various companies for 20 plus years in the private sector. Tonight we ask for approval of this full offer of employment, and we hope to get Ms. Atkinson to join our staff by October. So I can answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Staff, council, any questions of Ms. Paulfos? All right. Yeah, it would be nice to get her on board as soon as possible. I know it's somewhat of a hassle calling City Hall and getting the answer machine. So with that,
yes.
With that, is there a motion then to approve the Personnel Committee's recommendation of hiring Ms. Darcy Atkinson as our new Customer Service and Communications Assistant?
So moved.
All right, Ms. Bruce made that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, and Ms. Mortensen seconded that. Any further questions? Okay, then all those in favor will signify with aye. Ms. Mortensen?
Aye.
Mr. Chamberlain?
Aye.
Ms. Bruce?
Aye.
Mr. Molitor?
Aye.
Okay, and I'm Lisa Whalen. I say aye. Motion passes 5-0. So we're looking forward to having her on board. Thank you. With the next one, we have our CARES Act, our CARES Fund discussion. I'll hand it over to Mr. Baroni.
Thank you.
Did we lose? Okay.
Mayor. Nope, I'm here. My
All right.
voice is a little raspy. I apologize. So we've been meeting weekly about this at staff level. It's been generally myself, Brian Grimm, Paul Falls, and then Ron Beatty, and recently Joe Sathy. So I believe Joe is on. I see a new caller, so I'm assuming it's Joe. So we have a discussion that we would like to talk about tonight, and it has to do with the police funding as the method of obtaining and documenting why the city is going to be able to utilize the CARES funding that we do have. In your packet, I prepared a staff report that talked about the cost involved with our PD starting with March 1st, and then how we essentially backed out a number of personnel in the PD that did not really contribute to dealing or having to deal with that they were substantially dedicated to the response to COVID by the department. We backed out the 2 secretaries, the 2 CSOs, and then the officers that are assigned to the investigations portion. So that left 10 of the 17. And there's a couple spreadsheets there. There's a information there, summary from Chief Falls, which hope everybody had a chance to read. Like I said, there's a couple of summaries kind of going through the payrolls that we have incurred since March, and then an estimate of those same payroll for those same personnel for all PD through the end of, or the middle of November. And so that's at 1.169 million, almost 1.170 million. And then we have another spreadsheet that has a second column that shows the substantially dedicated personnel, those 10 people, the command staff, and 6 people that are assigned to patrol. And that cost is roughly $758,000. And so and then after that, I have what we call the low hanging fruit. And that's all the PPE and plexiglass and stuff like that. And we have that listed, and those are real costs that we've already spent. And so I think at this point, what I'd like to do is have Joe and Ron kind of walk us through why we came up with what we came up, and talk a little bit about the substantially dedicated portion and how that gets applied to the CARES funding. So Ron and Joe, if you're ready to go.
Sure, Madam Mayor, this is Ron Beatty. I'll start and Joe can weigh in as well. You know, we did take a look at that, and what Paul has produced is what I would consider a draft of a document that is a work in progress. It's his notes as to the work and efforts that are related to the 10 police employees that Mike mentioned. You know, I think what's important to keep in mind with regard to the public service cost is that those alone, of all the CARES eligible costs for cities, enjoy a presumption. We've talked about that repeatedly. And what the guidance says is that those costs are presumed to be substantially dedicated unless there is a conclusion to the contrary. So I think the way that it makes sense to take a look at those numbers is that, as Mike says, with regard to the 7 employees, the conclusion, or at least the recommendation when it comes to the council, is going to be that the presumption is rebutted with regard to those 7 employees, that they cannot be said to be substantially dedicated to COVID, but that the presumption is not rebutted with regard to Paul Falls and the other 9 employees that are listed. And I think that's an important way to think about it in terms of burden of proof, if you will. There is a presumption that these costs are eligible, and it's only if we find to the contrary that they're not. You know, I think it makes sense to talk for a minute about big picture. At least this is the way I see the big picture. And a lot of it's covered in the material that you've got before you. The city has $579,000 eligible expenses, or money that it's got available to it. Question is how you're going to spend that. So let's start subtracting. The first thing is, as Mike calls them, the low-hanging fruit, which you see the list there, which amount to a little bit less than $10,000. So pretty small amount of that total. There are going to be additional expenses. I guess the next bucket is there are probably going to be additional expenses. There will be additional legal fees. I know there's been discussion at some point about extra computers and so forth. I don't know where the city is on those, but assuming that those purchases are made and equipment obtained within the November 15th timeline, those would be, and that they're related to COVID, those would be eligible expenses as well. But I think that those are going to be relatively small amounts as well. The third bucket, which we've talked about before but haven't talked about tonight, is whether you're going to give any money to anybody else. We had a presentation tonight from the school district. You've talked before about some other contributions. There have been a variety of opinions from various council members as to whether that's a good use of the money or not, but that's what I'm seeing as sort of the third bucket. The fourth bucket is going to be the police costs. And unless you've decided in the third bucket to give away quite a bit of money, obviously that's going to be where the bulk of the money is still left for the reasons that we mentioned before. And the fifth bucket, if we get to it, is going to be whatever is left over that isn't spent and is returned. And normally we would, well, in anything other than Hennepin and Ramsey County, it would be returned to the county itself. But for detailed reasons, in Hennepin County, it's going to go back to a hospital. So though, to me, that's big picture as to how the money is going to be spent. And so again, going back, as you can see, the bulk of the money, if the city wishes to keep it, will be for reimbursement of public sector or public safety costs. Joe, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I do not have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brony?
The only thing that I think might be worthy of an explanation, and I think Joe might be able to explain it best since this is kind of his deal these days, is to talk about the phrase substantially dedicated and how that gets applied. So Joe, if you don't mind, because we had this discussion at our last meeting last Wednesday.
No problem, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The substantially dedicated presumption, as Ron mentioned, it applies to all public safety employees as a matter of administrative convenience, because the guidance for the CARES Act provides that they, as a matter of administrative ease, didn't necessarily intend for each public safety department throughout the country to go through and track the hours and then make a determination of whether or not the employee was substantially dedicated. They provided this presumption so that these employees who are responding to the public health emergency don't have to then take additional time to do that specific documentation. There is ongoing and evolving guidance related to the level of documentation that is coming out in sequence from the Treasury Department, the federal government, the Treasury Department itself, the Office of the Inspector General is in the Treasury Department. And so what we have here, what was presented, is really a reasonable application of the presumption, saying the presumption falls within the second part of the CARES Act that is not accounted for in the budget as of March 27th. And there, as we've talked about, there are two ways to do that. One, it cannot be paid for with a line item, or two, it is for a substantially different use. And the subset of a substantially different use is the public safety presumption. So it is that there are new duties for the public safety employees that were not accounted for, and therefore the resources of the city are being used in a different manner than was anticipated on March 27th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So when we looked at this and discussed it, that was why we wanted to be as accurate as we possibly could on the police staff as a whole and which of those, and we've identified 10, were substantially dedicated to COVID, and 7 we're saying we're not. And even with that amount of drilling down, you still see that between January or March 1 and November 15th, our total for those 10 employees would be nearly $758,000, which exceeds our 579.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think this evening it would be a good idea if we could weigh in and really give staff direction as to what we want to do with the funds. We're getting, I mean, October's, we're about 6-7 weeks away. I'm guessing, I don't have a calendar in front of me, from this deadline. And I think a number of you, myself included, have stated we really don't want this to go back to the county. We'd like to be able to use that in some fashion for our local community here. So with that, I'll start it off. Anybody want to weigh in first?
This is John.
This is Shannon. Go ahead, John.
John, go ahead.
Okay. Brian, the column 1 on where we list just the 10 officers says salary and benefits. So that is a fully, as I guess the term is, a fully loaded, that's vacation, sick time, the taxes, that's plus salary. That's the full number, right?
Yeah, correct, Councilmember Shumperlin and Council. That would be pretty much their salary, their health insurance, the para employer share, the retirement fund, the Medicare, all those type of employer type taxes and benefits as well. Yeah, and health insurance, etc.
Okay, thanks. My 2 cents worth is I believe strongly that we can use public safety salaries. Now, whether we do it at 100%, although I agree, you see, using the chiefs as 100%, I would agree with that. I would tend to lean to the 50% column you've got. In that, I've heard that quoted in a couple other cities, one being West St. Paul, which obviously has a very big ticket item in their public safety salaries. But even having said that, you take the 427 and the low-hanging fruit, which is about 10, we're still short, or not short, I guess, we're still looking to spend 142,000 additional. And to me, that gets back to, then is there something we want to grant to, whether it's food shelf, we can, but if they haven't reached out to us with a specific need, I don't know that I'd be comfortable soliciting it from them. So again, I believe in putting public safety in there, but probably in the spreadsheet where it shows the 50%. Now, one other question, I note that it talks in the verbiage in the questions and answers that it's actually, you reported by November 15th, but I thought there's also something to the effect of funds spent by December 30th. Is that not correct? And if that's correct, can we not also then add salaries until December 30th?
I don't believe we can. It's salaries through November 15th, even if they're paid out after November 15th, but it has to be spent by November 15th. And then any money that is not spent by November 15th, other than salaries, if they're paid out after that, we have to return to the county by December 30th.
Okay.
Is Mr. Baroni or Mr. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? I believe that's correct.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is This is Joe Sassy. There's just one point of clarification. Those are the two sort of most important dates that are thrown around a lot, and the December 30th date is the the CARES Act spend by date. Generally, that was provided in the CARES Act, and the November 15th date, it was implemented by the state when it received funds when it received the CARES Act funds to distribute to cities. It determined that cities needed to spend funds by November 15th to then return them to the county by, I believe it's November 20th, so that then the county, or in Hennepin County's case, the hospital, could spend and reimburse itself for funds from March 1st until December 1st, at which point it has to, the county or the hospital, send any unspent funds that they have back to the state so that the state then can return any unspent funds from all CARES Act money back to the federal government by December 30th.
Okay.
Clear as mud.
Done. All right.
Sorry, that was a very long timeline there. So.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Mike Molitor?
The one thing I'll make reference to in terms of John's comment about 50%, I believe that the 25% and 50%, 100% numbers were put there for illustrative purposes. I don't believe that we have to hang our hat on that and come out with the exact math that John has presented. I think you could say, if it's 65% to get to the 580, that works too. So I get what Brian's trying to do, but I don't think that has to be one of those three scenarios. I think those are just examples.
Madam Mayor, this is Ron Beatty. Could I comment about that?
Sure.
I think that's exactly the point. There's a two-step analysis in this, in our opinion. The first is whether the expenditure is CARES Act eligible, and that's the presumption and so forth that we've talked about. And in our view, you're either all in or you're all out. The 50% or 25 or any other number is really kind of the second step. In other words, even if all of the cost is CARES Act eligible, does the city want to make a decision for policy reasons or whatever to fund fund it at some other level or reimburse itself at some other level? The 50% is not intended to be a determination that you think they're only 50% dedicated to COVID. They're either in or they're out. And so I think Mr. Molitor's comment's exactly right. You can choose, if you make the determination that those two classes of employees are substantially dedicated, and therefore you have $757,000 worth of CARES Act eligible expenses, the council can make a determination about how much of that you want to reimburse, knowing that you only have 575 minus whatever you've otherwise expended to dedicate to that.
Thank you, Ron. All right. Anybody else? Ms. Bruce, I think you said you wanted to weigh in.
Thank you. I certainly never expected a detailed timesheet from public safety with how many hours they spent on every activity, but I was expecting at least the number of hours to be quantified somehow and documented and substantiated. But this is just a laundry list of activities without any reference at all to show how much time, even approximately, that each activity took. There's absolutely nothing here that equates $579,000 worth of time to these activities on this list. And I'm not doubting that these things were actually done, but I'm not comfortable with the level of documentation that I'm seeing here to justify these activities were COVID related. And I I heard Mr. Beatty talk about, the question is how do we spend the money? I think the question here is, can the city of Minnetrista identify a quantifiable loss across either our demographics or city to account for $579,000 worth of need? And the answer is either yes or no, but the answer isn't, let's just keep the money regardless of having a quantifiable loss. And I think whatever we do, in my opinion, we need to comply with the spirit of and the rules of the CARES Act, because we have a moral responsibility to use these funds for their intended purpose. And I don't support taking any action that uses these funds illegitimately for non-COVID-19 related costs. And I'm not seeing documentation that shows that, because we agreed not to do that when we applied for the funds. And we don't have quantifiable documented costs from our public safety department. And my view is, if the use isn't legitimate, the funds should be returned so they can be spent on ones that are. So that's my 2 cents. I know no one agrees with me, but that's all I have.
All right, Ms. Mortensen?
I think I'd like to look at our public safety salaries and kind of work backwards, come up with whether it's 50%, 65%, or whatever, and then look at the low-hanging fruit dollar amount, which is close to $10,000. Build in a cushion for the additional expenses that we're going to accrue by November 15th, and if there's any money left over for weekend or whatever the case may be, there probably won't be that much after that. But the point of not using the money or using the money for COVID only, I have a real problem giving this money to Hennepin County, where I don't know where that money is going to be spent either. So I like to keep the money right here in Minnetrista, where we know that it is being spent.
All right. So we've heard a lot from our attorneys, and they're saying that the police department does qualify, that it is a qualified expense. We've had staff has put together the expense and showed us what the police department qualifies for. And the thing is I don't think that I'm listening to our attorneys, and they're saying we're not doing this illegally. We're not doing this in any way, shape, or form underhanded or what it's not intended for. My approach to this would be, since we're kind of under the gun, so to speak, for timing, if we can legally, totally, 100% do it for the police department right now, that would give us some time to determine if we want to do some things later on for school district, we can, food shelf, we can look at that. It would give us more time to evaluate those requests. The other thing is, the school district said right now they have enough funds to cover their expenses. What my concern would be is, if we give them more money right now, are they going to be able to spend it by their deadline, which I think Mr. Borg was saying is December 30th. However, if we allocate this for our police fund, and then at the end of the year, or maybe in November or December, take a look at our fund balance, we may have some funds there that we could then allocate to others in the community where they would benefit from these funds as well, rather than saying, oh, well, let's just send it back down to Hennepin County, as Ms. Mortensen said, then we have no idea what it's actually going to be allocated for. They say it's going to go to the hospital, but how do we know that is actually allocations for COVID. I mean, they may get a whole bunch of money back, and who knows where it's going to go. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I really think we could take a little extra time then to determine where we want to spend some extra money. So
this is John. But as Mr. Beatty said, if you're looking at public safety, you either all in or all out. So if we then just don't say 25%, 50%, 65%, and just look at the total there, well, it's 758,000 without even talking about the low-hanging fruit. So then you've already covered the entire amount. Or are you talking about coming up with a hybrid as well?
no, what you do is you apply the 579, or you can take out the 9,300, leaving you with the 569, something like that. And then you can apply the 569 to your police department. You don't have to come up with the full 757. You can come up with as much leftover as you have, or
right,
you can apply the full, 579. But what I'm saying is, if at the end of the day we have a larger fund balance than what we feel comfortable with, then we can use that to help out other organizations such as the school or the We Can or Food Shelf with some of their expenses that they may still be incurring even after December.
Yeah, and I think what Ron, I don't know if you hold on just a second. I think what the mayor is trying to say is if we've already looked at this in our meetings with staff, and we whittled down the amount of eligible employees from 17 to 10. And then even with that 10, projecting that through the end of the timeline, November 15th, we have $757 something thousand. We know we only have $579,000. So that means we can fully capture the CARES money in payment for our police department. And then after that, it becomes our money. It's not CARES money after that. And then I think Mr. Mallard mentioned that at a previous meeting when we were talking about this, said then our reserve fund would go up $579,000. And at that point, the city, I think what Lisa's trying to say is, I think you have an opportunity to look and see, do you want to give our money, not CARES money, but our money, city reserve fund money, to whatever charities, school district, We Can, Gillespie Center, Food Shelf, whatever it might be. It's our money at that point in time. It's no longer CARES money. Because of the presumption, because of the cost, we can claim it as costs for police department personnel that were substantially dedicated to dealing with COVID. Ron, did you have something?
Well, that's true. The only caveat that I'd add is that, of course, as we've experienced in many different contexts, cities can't make charitable contributions unless there is a specific statutory authority to do that. So that if this money, or to the extent that the money goes into the city's reserves, then you're right, it becomes non-CARES money, it becomes city money, but those normal limitations on the city's ability to use those funds apply. And so we just have to keep that in mind. Again, you can see where the bulk of the expenses are going to be. That's why we presented the numbers, just so there's no misunderstanding about that. If you pay the $9,300 and double that or even triple it on other things that are going to come up that are the no-brainer kind of things, you're still left with having spent a very small amount of the money. And then the question is, so are you going to give any of it away? And if you're not, then the only way to effectively spend the money is on the police. I'm a very strong believer that we should be doing this according to the law, but I think the spirit of the law is expressed in that presumption. The presumption is that public safety, along with public health and a couple of other things that we don't happen to have. So it's really only focused on public safety in Minnetrista's case. The presumption is that those are substantially dedicated to combating COVID. A presumption that is rebuttable, and it's with regard to those 7 employees that the staff feels that that is rebutted. So, I mean, I think that's as clear an expression of the law and the intent that I can make. And again, you can see where the numbers are and the conclusions that you're going to have to make.
Be some way or some exception, if you will, of being able to contribute to nonprofit organizations. For instance, we can, if they provide a service to the city or to its residents, isn't that something that we can then look at and then contribute to them for that? Same with the food shelf?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, yeah, we certainly can, but you know, this comes up again. I'm just trying to remind everybody that cities are subject to limitations, statutory limitations on how they can utilize their funds. It's not a blank check. So just keep that in mind.
So
All right,
with that thought then, Mayor, so I know we've had a number of organizations, charitable, whatever you want to call them, nonprofits, like the school district, We Can, Gillespie, Food Shelf, etc. So one of the things that we talked about in a previous meeting, I couldn't tell you which one off the top of my head, but we talked about kind of prioritizing the fund. We use it for us, and if there's any left over, we, give it to these potential candidates. So this is my question for the night. It was a follow-up to the question I asked, I think, at our last meeting. Is, do you want to keep all the money ourselves, or do you want to give some to these charitable organizations or these nonprofits? And the reason I'm asking is because if you do want to, like you just said, Mayor, if you do want to have these nonprofits get some of our COVID CARES money, however you want to call it, then I would need to know that tonight. And I know Kennedy and Graven has given me kind of their boilerplate document contract that I could discuss with each of these entities and have them document for us exactly why and what they need, how much, and how it's related to COVID and how it would impact Minnetrista residents. And they would have to jump through all the hoops, and then we're responsible for that. So let's, as an example, let's say We Can $25,000. I'm just pulling a number out of thin air. They would have to say, if that's their request, they would have to document to the city why they need the $25,000. Can they spend it by November 15th? And is it related to COVID, and is it related to help for Minnetrista related residents, city of Minnetrista residents? They would have to jump through all those hoops, and we would have to verify that and then give them the money. And that would come out of the 579. But I need clear direction from the council tonight if that indeed is what you would like to do. As you see, we have more than enough police time with those 10 employees between March and mid-November to spend all of it on our own department. But as Mr. Beatty pointed out, can't just give it away because somebody wants it, even though it's our reserve money. I need to know if we're going to give it away as CARES money. Does the council want to do that? And for which ones, if not all of them? I don't know if I said all that right, Joe or Ron, but.
Okay. All right. Council, you want to weigh in?
I was just going to say, I think that's essentially right. And as Mike says, we'd want to enter into an agreement with any of those folks. So that's why we're asking for an indication now.
All right. All right.
This is Shannon. I'll weigh in on this. I would support giving some money to the food shelf, to We Can, and to use some of the money to pay for our legitimate COVID expenses that have been documented and accounted for. I think those are three valid ways that we can spend the money. So I just want to go on record supporting that.
Okay. Mr. Trumperlin?
At this stage, is the only one that we've heard from that it specifically quoted a number, was that the food shelf at our last meeting? Was it 48,000 or something they wanted to buy freezers?
Yes, I think so. We haven't
Mr.
heard.
Shumpelin, Mayor. Yeah, that's the only real numbers. Don't know how accurate that request is, if it's, all something that we could provide funds for. But yeah, you're correct. That's the only one that's actually given us some numbers.
So we'd be reaching out to, and I agree with Ms. Bruce, We Can and Food Shelf would be two that I know would serve. They serve Minnetrista residents. With We Can does a number of things, but I would be in favor of, if they had legitimate uses. Now, obviously, they need to jump through the hoops, as you said, and get us some solid numbers, because if they give us some number and say they're going to use it for something and they don't, or it's deemed to be non-COVID, we end up being on the hook for that money, the way I understand it. But I also then would be in favor of using the public safety numbers here, as well as the low-hanging fruit. So, that probably doesn't give you a number, or we don't have the numbers, but I would be in favor of granting some out.
Okay. And Mr. Molitor?
I would have to go with the out-of-pocket expenses that we've identified, as well as the public safety. I'm not in favor of the charitable causes, because I think it puts too much risk on the city, and a lot of administrative burden as well. I'm also concerned that, given at this point in time that the money has not been spent by these organizations, such as the freezers, it's a little hard to justify that, 5 or 6 months into this, you need this, when that's really isn't the case. So I'm not inclined to go down the path of, and as I stated at the last meeting, I just don't think it's the role for the city to do that, and also is not fair to other organizations that then get a chance to vie for the funds. So I think the most fiscally conservative and prudent way is to use it for public safety, as well as the out-of-pocket expenses. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Mortensen?
I would agree with using the bulk of it for public safety reasons, and then out of the pocket, leaving cushion for additional expenses, whatever comes up between now and November. And I'd like to just see what kind of money they're looking for from We Can and Food Shelf. I think Mike does have a point of opening up a can of worms, but I'd like to at least see their proposal of what they would be they'd be able to verify as COVID expenses. So that's my opinion.
So I think what we'd have to do, Mike, here is we'd have to check with We Can and with the Food Shelf, and we'd have to really lay it out very succinctly in terms of what is eligible expenses and what is not, and how does it directly relate to Minnetrista residents. That's the other question. The We Can and Food Shelf are a community-based organizations, and they serve a lot of different people from around Mound, Spring Park, Orono, Minnetrista, and so they would have to be very specific in terms of how much their additional money they're in need of for Minnetrista residents simply because of the COVID. If we could find that out and we could have that firm number by next time, but I also think we have to put some kind of a limit on it, because otherwise Yeah, but so I'd kind of like to hear that. I think the food shelves request for the freezers, I have a hard time saying, yes, this is only for Minnetrista residents. It seems like that might be for their entire organization and for everybody that comes in the door there. So I think we'd have to be a little more specific. But I would be in favor of the police department along with the other nonprofits that we've talked about. And that's not to say that in the future we can't look at some kind of relief for the school district as well. But that doesn't necessarily have to happen now. Like I said, we can take a look at that later on. So Mr. Baroni, does that give you enough direction?
I would have to say no, because it gives me a lot of
Okay.
directions. So I heard Councilmember Bruce say food shelves we can, and I'll call them the out-of-pocket expenses. I kind of like that phrase, whoever brought it up first. I think it was Mike. From Mr. Shumperlin, I heard we can food shelf, and then also the police department and low-hanging fruit or out-of-pocket expenses. I heard from Mike and Pam, police expenses and out-of-pocket expenses only, nothing to charitable causes. And then from Mayor Whalen, I heard, let's find out what they want. So I'm still unclear. I don't think it's any better than it was before. Sorry to be blunt, but
Okay.
I need a vote or something from all 5 of you to say, here's what we want city staff to do. They want you to do A, B, and C. Otherwise, I have no idea what to do tomorrow if I'm going to start in on this. I'm just being honest
All
with
right.
you. I don't feel like I have clear direction. Sounds like a majority of you would like to find out maybe what we can and the food shelf would like to do. I don't think anybody wants to give it to the Gillespie Center and the school district. At least that's what I've heard so far. Everybody's in favor, I think, of the low-hanging fruit or the out-of-pocket expenses. And most of you, except maybe Councilmember Bruce, are okay with the police department expenses. So it's a smorgasbord of what to do.
Well, what I heard and what I'm understanding, to summarize it, is at least 4 out of 5 are comfortable applying it to the police department, but we're willing to look at least 3 out of 5 at least are willing to look at contributing some funds to We Can in the food shelf. Now, having said that, we can, I'm viewing it as, okay, well, let's find out how much we should allocate. We don't really have any number in front of us for We Can or even for the food shelf, because they just gave us a total number of $48,000 for the freezers, and we need to find out, well, is this really only for Minnetrista or is it for the whole community? So
no,
I would
I
say we're going to be applying.
I don't know what
it sounds like we're going to be applying
maybe the council.
I have a question. Why is there a concern about whether it's for Minnetrista? The public safety department serves St. Bonnie. So why is there a concern about the food shelf serving only Minnetrista? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, St. Bonnie pays for that.
Yeah, it's the way I'm viewing it is because we have to only, because we're Minnetrista, we can only give to organizations that serve Minnetrista. Now, I might be wrong. We might be able to give money anywhere we want. Mr. Beatty, do you want to weigh in?
This is Councilmember Molitor. Before we go down that path, can I make a suggestion here? Although
yes.
I'm not in favor of the charitable approach, my suggestion would be, rather than putting the shoe on the organization, why don't we take the lead and decide? So, as an example, the food shelf was requested $48,000 for freezers. If you're concerned about this money not being spent for Minnetrista residents, my recommendation would say, why don't you propose X amount of money, some number lower than $48,000? I don't know if it's $5,000, $10,000, $40,000, whatever the number is, and that's what they get, rather than going back to them. Because to Mike Baroni's point, he's got to move on this, and we've got to give him some direction. And if we go back and ask them, well, now you're opening up this whole can of worms, as Ms. Mortensen mentioned, I really think if you're going to do this, give them a number and be done with it. And you can decide, my number is 0, but I'm one of 5, and say, hey, okay, you guys get 25,000 for freezers, and they buy X number of freezers to fill that, or likewise with weekend, because otherwise this is going to drag on forever.
Sure.
Yeah,
Right. Good point.
Just to follow up on that, just what Mr. Molitor said, I don't want to give them the perceived blank check. What I do want to find out, though, is if the council could maybe, as Councilmember Molitor suggested, give me an upper limit that I can go up to for either organization. It doesn't have to be the same number. They could be different based on what these organizations do. I don't care, but some number where I could say, well, if you can give us verifiable, documentable info that shows that the expenses that you could possibly use this money for are benefiting Minnetrista residents and are related to COVID, we'd be happy to give you X amount of dollars. And if the upper limit's 20 and they come up with $15,000 worth of stuff, well, then they get 15. So
How about this? How about we know that our out-of-pocket for the city of Minnetrista came to close to 10,000. How about using that number as the max, and then they would have to come back and quantify how they would spend that $10,000 in COVID.
that could be. I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. What's a feasible number? I guess we could argue about what the number is, but and I don't want to make this too big a conversation, but yeah, I think there's got to be some number where we say we'll go up to this if you can prove to us that it's worthy of the CARES money. So.
All right. Anybody else have a number they want to throw out?
This is John. I would agree with the 10. That was a number bouncing around in my head, and if, as Mr. Maroney said, if they can't come up with numbers up to 10, then they get what they can come up with, but they've got to be able to support it. And I think 10 for either organization, then it's a smaller number than maybe it would have been originally, but then they've got both of those organizations, as you alluded to, serve multi-communities. So we don't know if they're getting money from Mound or other cities as well. And maybe they come back and say,
John, you're breaking up. Hello, John. Uh-oh. Did we lose John?
I can't tell. It says he's on, but
okay.
It's hard to tell.
Maybe his voice is gone.
Okay. All right. So there's, yeah. All right. Well, I think I'd be just slightly more generous. So just so you know, I talked to the mayor of Mound, Ray Salazar, today. They are giving we can 104,000. So I'm not suggesting that we do the same, but I guess what I'd like to do is maybe do somewhere around 15 or 20,000 and see what we come up with, what they come up with.
This is Councilmember Molitor. I would be in favor of what Mr. Chamberlain and what Ms. Mortensen said. Given our out-of-pockets are about 10, that seems a pretty, at least some benchmark to use. That seems right.
All right. Okay.
And this is Shannon. I'll weigh in on this. I would be more generous as well, because I think it's a legitimate need for people that are that have been harmed by COVID-19, and I think that's what this money was meant for. And I would be a lot more generous. And in fact, I'd probably raise it to 40.
Okay. Anybody, can we at least kind of go halfway in between, something like that? I mean, I think, I don't know, I mean, 20 doesn't sound too bad, but
I would be fine. I would be fine with 20, just to make a decision.
Right. Yeah. So
In
can we
that same
decide on
spirit, I'll be okay with that as
20?
well.
All right. So we're going to decide on 20 if that's okay with you, Pam. I don't know if John is able to weigh in yet.
Yep, that's fine.
All right. So we're saying 20,000, and I'm assuming per organization. And does that give you now, Mr. Baroni, a little more direction? Uh-oh, did we lose Mr. Baroni?
Nope, I just needed to unmute. Sorry. So yes, that gives me a lot of that. I'm fine with that. I can see 22 organizations, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Do you want a motion and a vote on that?
Well, that was going to be my last recourse if I didn't get a consensus of the council, but I believe I got a consensus of the council. So.
All right. Consensus of the council. All right, 20,000 to each organization, and you'll come back at our next meeting and report back with that. And then what I'm hearing, at least the majority of the council saying is, then the balance of the money will go to the low-hanging fruit as well as the police expenses. Is that
correct?
Okay.
And
everybody.
I think that should require a vote.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is, Mr. Baroni, wouldn't that come back at our next meeting once we know the amount that these two organizations can use?
Yeah, Mayor, that's not a bad idea, and I understand the perspective of Councilmember Bruce on that, why she wants to have a vote on it, and that's fine with me. So we'll do some work on that. We'll hopefully have something in your packet next time to at least address the two charitable organizations and our out of pocket and et cetera. So we'll go from there.
Okay.
And Madam Mayor,
Right.
I agree. I think that's the appropriate way to do it.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in or have comments?
This is John. I'm sorry, my phone died, so I had to grab another phone. So
Well, welcome back.
I missed what you've just agreed to.
Okay. Well, John, what you just agreed to. No. So we agreed that we would do 20,000 to each organization, and the balance would then be used for the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, out-of-pocket expenses, and then anything else left over would go to the police department. That's kind of where we're at right now, and staff is going to approach the two organizations to find out exactly how much they need or could use, and then they'll come back with a resolution and approval by the council, so we'll actually take an actual vote at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right. So that concludes all of our business items. So we'll move on to administrative items, staff reports. Mr. Baroni.
Mayor, just two items. We already covered one. I was just going to mention that we might want to move up the start time of our October 5 work session. So we covered that, and we sound like we will. And then the only other item I have is the fire district meeting that was originally scheduled as a Zoom meeting this Friday, the 25th, has been moved to Friday, October 2nd, 1 week later. So hopefully we'll be able to give a report on that when we get to our next city council meeting, which will be the 5th. So we might be able to give a summary that night. So, and that's it.
All right. Thank you. No other staff meetings, staff reports?
I don't think so, Mayor.
All right.
I think they're exhausted. So.
All right. Are there any council reports? Mr. Trumperlin?
I've attended the Pioneer Sir Creek last Thursday. Most of the meeting was taken up with discussing and commenting on comments that we received from different agencies, DNR, Board of Water and Soil Resources in Hennepin County regarding our 4th Gen plan. So we got them all answered.
Right, good. Anybody else?
I just wanted to mention that WCC is promoting the first annual Surfside Bar and Grill charity golf event on September 25th, and the proceeds go to Mound Volunteer Fire Department Relief Association. They can sign up if interested at the Surfside Bar and Grill, and info is on the website or on WCC website as well.
All right, thank you. Okay, Ms. Bruce, anything?
No.
All right, I have no reports as well, so with that, we can be concluded if there is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce. Is there a second?
This is John. I'll second.
All right, and Mr. Chamberlain made that second. So all those in favor will signify with aye. Ms. Mortensen?
Aye.
Ms. Bruce?
Aye.
Mr. Molitor?
Aye.
Mr. Chamberlain?
Aye.
And I vote aye, Lisa Whalen. So we are adjourned. And we'll see you all on the 5th. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.